All right, today we're going to dive into a really big question, one that goes right to the heart of Christian theology. We're going way back to the 17th century to look at the work of a theologian named John Owen, and we're going to break down his incredible argument for how the suffering of an innocent Christ could ever be seen as just.
I mean, this is the core of it, right? It's a huge paradox. It just seems to fly in the face of everything we think we know about fairness and justice. If God is perfectly good, how could punishing the wrong person ever be the right thing to do? This is exactly the problem that Owen sets out to solve, and his answer is pretty fascinating.
So, to really get his solution, we first have to appreciate the sheer scale of the problem he's addressing. Owen basically frames it as this: a divine dilemma, a kind of conflict inside the very nature of God.
Think about it like this. On one hand, you have God's justice. It's absolute, it's perfect, and it demands that sin has a consequence. But on the other hand, you have God's mercy, which wants to forgive people and save them. So these two things seem to be on a collision course. How can God be both perfectly just and perfectly merciful at the exact same time?
And for Owen, there was just no wiggle room here. He is absolutely firm on this point. God couldn't just sweep sin under the rug or pretend it didn't happen. That would go against the very core of who he is. So a price had to be paid. The real question was who was going to pay it.
So that leads us to the next piece of Owen's argument. He starts by challenging a pretty basic assumption we might have. Is it always unjust for one person to suffer for what someone else did? And his answer, which might surprise you, is no, not always.
Now that is a bold claim. You might be thinking, wait, what? But Owen doesn't just throw it out there. He actually tries to build a case for it, using examples where he believes this very principle is already at work. He points back to these stories from the Old Testament. In every one of these cases, you see the consequences of sin falling on people who didn't personally commit the original act. Canaan is cursed because of what his father Ham did. King David's sin leads to a plague that kills 70,000 of his people. Now, whether you agree with the justice of these events or not, Owen's point is that this idea of one person bearing the consequences for another isn't completely unheard of in the biblical story of justice. So here's the absolute key. For Owen, this kind of substitution can't be random. You can't just punish any innocent person. He says it can only be considered just when there is, and this is his 17th century language, a peculiar conjunction. Basically, a unique and incredibly powerful bond between the one who sinned and the one who suffers for it. And this idea of a unique connection, well, it's everything. It's the whole ballgame for his argument. Owen says the bond between Christ and believers is the most profound conjunction you could possibly imagine, and he breaks it down into three specific types. These three types of union: natural, which is about their shared humanity; mystical, a deep spiritual bond; and federal, which is like a formal legal agreement, all work together to create a connection so deep that, in Owen's view, it makes Christ's substitution not just possible, but perfectly just. Okay, so the first one is the most straightforward, the natural conjunction. This is all about shared humanity. When Christ became a human being, he entered into a real, physical, natural relationship with the rest of us. He literally became one of us. But here's the key distinction Owen makes, and it is a huge one. For us, being human is necessary. We're just born this way, we don't get a choice. But Christ's humanity, Owen argues, was totally voluntary. He chose to become human for the specific reason of taking our place. That act of will, that choice, makes his connection to us completely different. All right, so that's the physical connection. The second one goes way deeper than just flesh and blood. Owen calls this a mystical conjunction, which is a spiritual bond that's incredibly personal and intimate. To help us get our heads around this, Owen uses these powerful images from the Bible. Christ is connected to his people like a head is to its own body, or like a vine is to the branches that grow from it, or even like a husband is to his wife. It's a union of life, of purpose, of shared identity.
Okay, but wait a minute. This raises a really obvious question, and Owen tackles it directly. If this mystical union only happens when a person actually becomes a believer, how could it be the reason for Christ suffering for them 2,000 years ago?
And Owen's answer comes down to divine purpose. He argues that in the mind and plan of God, the church was already chosen to be Christ's bride long before the world even began. So Christ suffered for the spouse that he knew he was going to have. The union existed in purpose long before it happened in time.
And that brings us to the third and final piece of the puzzle, the federal conjunction. You can think of this one as the legal, formal part of the relationship. It's like a binding contract.
A surety is basically a legal guarantor, like someone who co-signs a loan. They formally agree to pay the debt if the first person can't. Owen argues that Christ voluntarily stepped up to be the surety of a new covenant, legally taking on the debt of sin for everyone connected to him through those other two unions.
So you take these three powerful connections, natural, mystical, and federal, and you put them all together. This is where Owen brings his whole argument to this amazing conclusion, what he sees as a glorious resolution to that dilemma we started with.
Remember where we started? This massive conflict, this impossible tension between a justice that has to punish and a mercy that wants to forgive. Owen's whole point is that the cross doesn't pick one over the other, it satisfies both perfectly.
And this is the solution. Because of this unique three-part union, Christ isn't just some random person taking the fall. He is so deeply and completely connected to believers that when he is punished, justice considers their sin punished. And because that debt is now paid in full, mercy can be extended freely and justly to them.
Owen even quotes an earlier writer to capture the beauty of this. It's not a compromise. It's a sweet permutation, a glorious exchange where justice and mercy both get everything they demand.
So the crucial point of the whole argument is that nothing is sacrificed. The demands of the law are totally met. The righteousness of God's justice is on full display. And at the exact same moment, grace and mercy are completely victorious. It's a total and perfect solution.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Owen's argument from 400 years ago really pushes us to think about what justice even is. What if its highest goal isn't just punishment, but creating a resolution so perfect that it restores harmony to everything, even to the very character of God? It's a pretty profound idea to think about.